All right. Welcome back, listeners and viewers. We've got some action on YouTube lately, so that's awesome. Thank you very much. This is some episode after 10 on the podcast.
We're getting pretty close to the end of the season.
We are. We have, I think we have four or five left. Five, I think.
Yeah, and that includes we'll do our top 10 at the end of the year.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, we're a few days away from Halloween at time of recording. And then,
do you have a costume picked out?
I don't. I actually teach on the day, and I asked my students if they dress up for Halloween. They said, yeah, later when we go out trick-or-treating. So I haven't decided if I'm dressing up to go teach or not. Okay, so we are doing a brand new feature this week. However, we are going to do quick cuts first. So I didn't think this was going to make the 2024 cut. So I'm going to do You'll Never Find Me, directed by Indiana Bell. I think it technically came out at the end of 2023, but it's a 2024 for us because it's an Aussie film. I think it was released there first.
Is it ridiculously hardcore and brutal?
Not in the way that you would think for Aussie films, but it's really good.
That's cool. That was not on my radar.
Yeah, it came out on. I streamed it on Shudder, and it's been on my radar for months, and I haven't got around to watching it. And part of the reason was how it was set up in the trailer. They don't give anything away in the trailer, but you can see that it's two people basically in a room. It's set up like a play.
Oh, I kind of like those.
So if the performances are not on, forget about it.
It's called You'll Never Find Me?
Yes.
Which is kind of ironic if it's two people in a room together.
Well,
many places to hide.
I'm not going to spoil the concept, but I will read you. So it's got 5.8 on IMDb, 81% critic, and 66% audience score.
Solid?
Solid, yeah, on Rotten Tomatoes. So Brendan Rock and Jordan Cowan. It's basically two people. There are other characters that come in flashbacks and stuff, but basically it's two people who run the show. So Patrick is a strange and lonely resident of a mobile home park at the back of an isolated caravan. After a violent thunderstorm erupts, a mysterious young woman appears at his door seeking shelter from the weather. The longer the night wears on and the more the young woman discovers about Patrick, the more difficult she finds it to leave. Soon, she begins to question his intentions, and he begins to question hers.
Cool. That was not on my radar at all, but you got me interested.
It's really good. It's really good. And it takes a bit of a left turn at the end, but it's straight up performances and really good. Like you can just feel the tension between these two characters.
So this had wide release in 2024, but was in film festivals and stuff in 2023, or is it a 2023?
I believe it was a 2023 release. At least it's showing up that way on IMDb. But as with many films, we don't see them until the next year.
So would you contemplate putting this on your top 10 for 2024? Do you think it qualifies?
If we say it's a viable option, then I would do it it would probably make my top 10.
Cool.
Yeah, very good. Very good. So I encourage you to go see it. It's called You'll Never Find Me. And if you can't stream it on Shudder, I'm sure you can find it elsewheres.
Nice. Good one.
Yeah,
I'm curious to check that one out. All right, my quick cut is also a 2024 film that I don't think we'll have time to do a full episode on, but this is, can you guess what it is?
No.
Okay. This is Speak No Evil, the 2024 American remake, directed by James Watkins and starring James McAvoy and Mackenzie Davis. A family is invited to spend a whole weekend in a lonely home in the countryside, but as the weekend progresses, they realize that a dark side lies within the family who invited them. I'd said to you after I watched this, I think this is one of the best examples of a foreign film remade, and done in an American version. And I find typically those are shot for shot or very close.
Yeah.
So if we're thinking of like Rec or The Ring or The Grudge, those are all classic examples of American remakes. And I think your criticism of these in the past has been, if you're just going to remake the film, then why not just go watch the original? Yeah. So I agree with that in many ways, other than if you're trying to find a new audience.
Yeah.
The thing I appreciate about this one is James McAvoy is really good.
I've not seen him in anything that he hasn't been good in.
Yeah, like he was amazing in Split. He's really good in this. So I think he brings a lot to the role. I think Mackenzie Davis is really good, and they do some interesting things with her character.
Now, is she the wife?
She's the wife of the victim family.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But what I appreciate about this film is it is largely similar beats, close to shot for shot, not entirely, but for the first 2/3, but then they really changed the third act.
Oh, interesting.
So oftentimes it's like, okay, if I'm going to watch Wreck, the remake or the original, it's basically the same film, except one is in English. Right. But in this case, you're taking the same concept, but then they do something different and interesting with it. So it's still worth watching and arguably worth existing.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, and that's always the question, right? That I've had for sure is why bother? And I know you had said to me after you watch it, yeah, they did something. Because that was a big thing that I was thinking when I saw the original. And there was already talk when we had seen the original that there was going to be a remake. And I thought, okay, well, I hope they're going to do something different. So it sounds like that's the case.
Because I know you've been really hesitant about this one.
I have been.
And is that largely, was that your concern? Or was there something about the film, the first one, that made you less interested in seeing a remake?
Maybe not less interested. I think it's just that it's such a downer of a film. It's one of those ones that's like, okay, I have to kind of get ready to see it.
And it was super, super dark. Yeah. Okay, so it was not the idea that it was a remake of a foreign film. It was more the content itself that was just too dark for you.
Especially when they have somebody like James McAvoy and you know that it's going to be well done.
Yeah.
I mean, my complaint often with American remakes is that I'd much rather watch somebody who understands the culture. And this is the problem, I think, with Asian films in particular. They come at the content from a different angle. And I think Americans don't get that. And they rarely make as good films.
Yeah.
So I mean, knowing that it's good is certainly a ways for me to.
Do you think you'll watch it, or do you still think you'll pass on this one?
No, I'll probably watch it because there's no denying that the first one was very good. It was just that the ending was like, whoa. So I wasn't sure. I didn't think they'd have the courage if they did a remake to follow up with the same ending.
Right.
And I think it's not, and we don't need to give many details, but I will probably get around to watching it for sure.
So I'd recommend both the original and the remake. And the interesting thing is because they're different, you could probably watch them in any order. It wouldn't matter too much. But I think watching both of them, maybe for your sanity, it's not like a double feature kind of thing you'd want to do in one night. But I think they're both worth checking out at some point. Yeah, so that's my quick cut.
Unless you're feeling really grim and you want to dive into that.
Yeah, if you really like that feeling. So Speak No Evil 2024.
Nice. That is a good choice. And I know that it's got some really good reviews and
84% critic and audience score. So they're the exact same.
Oh, that is good.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay. Well, you didn't do a franchise or anything. That's good.
Not this episode.
Okay. So we ready for what we're actually talking about today?
I'm ready.
Okay. So our feature presentation is... Apartment 7A.
I came here for one reason. To make something of myself. To be on stage. To see my name in big lights. But dreams don't always come true.
You know, when we found you...
Whoa!
You lost, honey? You were kind of a mess.
We want to help.
The place is yours if you want it.
Terry, you don't even know these people.
Look, moving into my own place feels like a first step.
Which I don't think it's a spoiler to say that it's a prequel to Rosemary's Baby, because they do that it is what it is.
It's so funny you say that, though, because I know I've complained a lot earlier in the season about having trailers ruin experiences for me. So in the latter half of this year, I've just been trying to go into everything blind. So someone had recommended, I think Aaron said, you should watch Apartment 7A. I said, okay. And I didn't know because I didn't watch a trailer or read anything about it. I went in blind. But then partway through, I was like, this seems oddly familiar. And then you had messaged me, and I think you had told me that it was. Right around the time I was starting to get the idea that, oh, this seems kind of like Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah.
And then I saw the cover art. And even when I saw the cover, it seemed kind of familiar.
Yeah.
And it was kind of evocative of something, but I didn't place it to Rosemary's Baby. But of course, when you hold them side by side, which we could maybe do right now. Yeah. Obviously there's a play on the original poster.
For sure. Yeah, that they've used that same kind of hue of green.
Yeah. So what was so you knew going in that this was going to be a prequel to Rosemary's Baby?
I knew it was associated with. I wasn't sure if it was a prequel or something else.
So does that make you excited, or does that make you dubious that, okay, here's a classic horror film. It, is widely regarded to be a classic and one of the best ones. Were you thinking, why are they touching this thing? Or are you thinking, okay, I'm intrigued to see what they do, or, it's time for a remake?
Okay, so if you hear some thumping around, my dog not only just moved the camera tripod, but he's been completely comatose for the last 5 hours, and now he's bouncing a ball around. So thanks, buddy. Okay, so the director is Natalie Erica James. Cast Julia Garner as Terry, and she was in Ozark's Perks of Being a Wallflower, We Are What We Are. Diane Wiest, who I think is excellent, and Skylar James. Last I checked, because this changed a couple times over the last week, it had 42% critic score, 71% audience score, and 5.8 on IMDb. So the summary is a struggling young dancer named Terry finds herself drawn in by dark forces when a peculiar, well-connected older couple promise her a shot at fame. So this takes place in 66 or 65 rather, and Rosemary's Baby is 66. And of course, I mean, we can, I'll get into some of the things that they match up exactly, the two films.
Yeah, I guess that'll be a spoiler.
Yeah, I'll wait till spoilers. But so I had some thoughts about.
Sorry, going back to, I think we got interrupted by the camera thing.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, were you dubious about this?
Oh yeah,
because it was tied to Rosemary's Baby, or were you open-minded about it?
I had hopes, but I was doubtful. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I did make a note to myself, I was like, wow, this is brave to take on this franchise that has this tradition. And trying to step into the shoes of a director like Roman Polanski, who arguably was at his height when he did this, right?
And I feel like almost every popular horror franchise or film has been given the sequel treatment or the prequel treatment, or there's very few just singular films left that haven't been touched on that are considered classics. So it seems like inevitably maybe every classic horror film is due for a remake or something at some point. So I never anticipated, though, that Rosemary's Baby didn't really seem like something that would get sort of a franchise treatment, but I suppose a remake is always fair game.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is another thing that I wondered about, especially as I rewatched the film last night. Did it need a prequel? Like, that whole story is in the original.
Yes.
So did you need to, we know it happened before because that shows up, like Rosemary meets the Terry character in the original.
That's right.
So it's like, well, did we need to have her story? Like, we know what the story of the building is, of the couple. I just didn't feel like it did much to enhance.
No, I was kind of hoping that they would do something a bit different.
Yeah.
And I know when you and I, we did a whole season. If you've not heard, if you go back to our second season of our podcast, the whole theme was original versus remake.
Yes.
And we kind of said that a good remake should keep the spirit of the original, but then do something new and different with it. And I'm not sure that this one did enough new and different. And it actually felt like a remake.
It did. It did.
Even though it actually reminded me of Strangers Chapter 1.
Yeah.
Which was billed as a prequel, but functionally is basically a remake.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of good here. I think Julia Garner was really good as you mentioned, Diane Wiest. I think her character was really good.
She was really good.
I really like Julia Garner in Ozarks. Did you watch that?
No, I'm familiar with the show, but I haven't seen it.
I thought her character was one of the more compelling ones. So I was excited to see her. And I was pretty into the film for the first act.
Yeah.
Before they got into kind of rehashing that's where it deviates the most or has the most unique elements, I think, from the original.
So, I mean, that was one of my, it's not a complaint. I think Julia Garner's quite good, but I don't, so I'm struggling to say this. I think she's a good actress. I'm not sure she was the best cast for this role. So how do you feel about that?
I could maybe see that. I did find myself not fully buying in or being fully sympathetic.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure because it was her or her performance or because I was a bit annoyed that it seemed like they were just retreading ground. So differentiating between those two things, I might have to go back and watch it. But I hear what you're saying in that I almost started rolling my eyes a little bit. And I think I felt less sympathetic to her because I felt like, it's hard to talk about maybe without the spoilers.
Yeah,
but
we can save it. Yeah.
There's a couple of scenes where had this been completely unique and original, I think I would have been more on her side and more invested. But I found myself more just being like, okay, well, here we go. This is more of what we've seen in the past.
Even down to the point where there's some, copying of lines from the original to this one.
Yes.
And I think, and I'm reading between the lines here, but would you have preferred to see more of a story about the building or the older characters I would have liked to have known the backstory of that as opposed to, this is the same story as we got last time.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with you there because it felt like just Rosemary's Baby with a few little differences, but mostly the same plot points. Whereas, had you taken that universe but examined it from a different angle, so maybe you focus more on the other characters in the apartment or the building or more of the backstory, which they touch on. But I think that's a fair critique. And I think I would agree. But at the beginning, for me, I was really invested and really gripped with that audition scene.
Yes.
And when she first rolls her ankle, I don't think that's a spoiler because that's happens in the first few minutes.
Yeah.
It's the actually opening scene of the film, I seem to recall. And
because this is set up for the rest of the film.
Yeah,
right?
So this is very early on. But when they ask her to keep doing that jumping move, and she does it again and again and again, that was tense. And you're just waiting for something to happen. And it really made you empathize and sympathize with her, really made you hated the guys running the audition. Yes. So I was really invested in the film at that point. And I think it's not until they start retreading some familiar ground is where I started to lose interest. But it, for the first act, at least, had me hooked.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think the first act, because it is new material of this new person trying to make it, in New York, that was compelling because of her injury and because even if you're not a dancer, you can appreciate, okay, if you have an injury to your ankle or your foot as a dancer, you're screwed, right? Yeah. So yeah, I agree with you. I think the first act had me engaged, had me interested. And then as soon as she gets to the apartment, it basically becomes Rosemary's Baby.
That's right. And it's interesting because during the first act, I didn't realize that that's what this film was.
Yeah,
that it was associated with Rosemary's Baby. And it was around the time where some of the familiar things start to happen. And then you had messaged me. And then that really changed the lens through which I was experiencing the movie. But I was starting to wonder because I was like, oh, I feel like I've seen this movie before.
I mean, and I stand to be corrected, but the second time I was watching, I was really trying to watch for, and I'm sorry, but this is what you're going to get if you try to do a prequel to Rosemary's Baby. I was looking for some of the classic shots that Polanski had done, like through door frames and things. So if you're going to try to tackle something that has this legacy, you better knock people's socks off because I think for me, what was the 42% was the critic score.
Oh, wow. Okay. So quite low.
Yeah. I think for that reason, I mean, I think the audience was probably satisfied. Who knows how many people younger than we are would have seen Rosemary's Baby and made the connection. If you're, an Uber fan, that's probably true.
But then I'm thinking, had I watched this film in a vacuum, I think it's good. Like, I think it delivers. I think the performances are good. My issues with it are more as a prequel to Rosemary's Baby. But for someone who had never seen that film, if they just went in blind and watched this movie, I feel like there's actually, I don't think it's offensive. I don't think it like desecrates the legacy of Rosemary's Baby like a lot of remakes and prequels tend to do. So I think it treats the material with respect, but I wonder if they just tried to play it too safe. If they were too nervous to try new things.
Yeah, because, and I mean, I get it. If you want to set it, like even for me, if you had done something similar, but set it in a different era, because it seems to me like, at least if we, are to believe the film, the building and the people inside have been doing what they're doing for a long time.
Yeah.
So set it in the 30s, in the early history of Broadway, or in the 40s, or like just give it a different taste, because you're basically a year apart. You're doing things like the haircut scene, which happens in the first one. I mean, obviously you've got carryover characters like Saperstein, the doctor, and so on, right? Which makes sense to me. But yeah, I just, it was lackluster. It was a decent enough film.
Yeah.
But knowing what I know, I can't watch it as something that isn't a prequel.
Yep. No, I think that's fair.
Was
it, I had read, or had you read, I think the original intention too, that this was set for theatrical release. And then at some point they decide to make it straight to VOD.
Oh, yeah.
So I wonder if they saw something in the final cut that made them nervous to put this in theaters or didn't think it would make money. But I feel like at one point there was a decision to transition it from a theatrical release to a VOD release.
Yeah, that does ring the bell for me too.
It's kind of ironic too, because I watched a interview with the writers, and they had said that, well, you can't just remake this film and do all the same story beats as the first one. I thought that was kind of funny. Actually, isn't that kind of what you did? So it's interesting that maybe their perception of it is not what it is, but interesting that we both had similar takeaways.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how you could sit there and say that when you're setting a good portion of the second and third acts in the building, the same building, in the same, so Terry moves into, this empty apartment, and it's Guy and Rosemary that move into, is it Lillian? I wrote her, Lily's apartment.
Right.
Lily Gardner. And did they mention in Rosemary's Baby, she's in a coma or whatever. So there's lots of things, like when she meets Terry in the original Rosemary Baby, she has the necklace on.
Yeah.
With the Tanis root. So there's lots of crossover. That I like. I liked those little nods that if you'd seen the original, you could go, okay, I like what you're doing here. And we'll talk about the ending.
Yeah. And I think that's something we said that we like about a good remake.
Yeah.
Is when they give you some Easter eggs or nods to the original.
Exactly.
But they have to do enough novel things to make it worthwhile.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I have too much to say about this one that doesn't wander into spoiler territory. Do you?
Not really, because I was just going to say, I don't know that we can talk about much if we don't get into spoilers. Arguably, I mean, you have an idea of what the movie's about. But I would like to talk about how it's connected and how that goes.
Yeah. So should we give recommendations and we can move into spoilers?
I think it's a recommendation for me, particularly if you're not stuck on the original, like if you're not a super fan of the original movie, because that probably, I think, would take away from your enjoyment of this one. But if you're not a super fan, I think you can go in and enjoy this one for the story that it is.
Yeah, I've been struggling with if I'm going to recommend this film or not. I think ultimately maybe I don't recommend it. I don't know if there's enough here to really, because I would say if you've not seen Rosemary's Baby, then you should go watch Rosemary's Baby. I'm not sure I would say you should watch Apartment 7A.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
And I don't know if the things that they do, I think that the two standouts for me are Julia Gardner's performance and Diane Weist's performance.
Yeah.
And I think those are both really good. You certainly, I wouldn't say it's a mistake to go and watch this. You could certainly watch it, and I think it's fine.
For sure.
But if you've seen the original and you love Rosemary's Baby, I don't know if there's much reason to watch this. And if you've not seen Rosemary's Baby, then I feel like you should go watch Rosemary's Baby. So I struggle to think of a scenario where you should really watch this unless you're just plowing through 2024 horror films like crazy and you just want something else to watch. Yeah. In which case it's fine.
Yeah.
But it would not be a strong recommend. It would be a very low priority.
Yeah. I probably, mine isn't rush out and see it. It's like, yeah, it's okay. It's worth seeing, but yeah, you've got some valid points there about why just go watch the original if you're going to watch this one.
And it's interesting because the film's from 1968, the original Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of, maybe this is an unfair stereotype, but I know like talking to students and stuff at school, younger generations, I think are a bit hesitant to go back and watch a movie from the 1960s. Like it feels very old. And I'd only seen Rosemary's Baby a couple of years ago on your recommendation.
Yeah.
And I was a bit worried that it might not hold up, but it held up very well. Like I really enjoyed Rosemary's Baby. So even if you feel like, that's from 1968, that's ancient history, I don't want to go watch that, I think it holds up and it's still worth checking out.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's certainly that would be, if you've got to choose one, I would choose the original.
Yeah.
All right. So
spoilers,
hesitant recommend and a not recommend.
Probably.
Spoilers. Spoilers.
So I just had an upcoming thing spoiled for me.
Okay, can we maybe come back to the Julia Garner thing?
Sure.
So
the scene where after when she finds all the she's drugged by Alan, and then the next day I think she's at the dance studio and she goes to the bathroom and she starts to have the marks all over her.
Yeah.
And at that point I was like, oh, this seems really familiar. And that was right around when you messaged me and said, oh, this is the prequel to Rosemary's Baby. It's like, oh, okay. So at that point I started to be like, they did that in the first one. That's how it starts, right? As she finds marks on her body.
Yeah. And she has that. I mean, they also frame it the same way where Rosemary in the original has a nightmare that she's being assaulted.
Exactly.
And it's the same thing because, and this is a niggle for me too. I don't know why they did that dance number. I mean, I get they're trying to show that she's inebriated or whatever, maybe, but it's like, okay, that was so tonally inconsistent.
Yeah, I agree.
And I just thought, again, when I rewatched it last night, I'm like, this makes no sense. I mean, he's already commented that she can't hold her liquor.
Yeah.
She's dropped her glass. It's not a leap to think that he drugged her.
Yeah.
So why you have to do this weird dance scene, I have no idea. Unless it's just a vehicle to get her where they want her, right? But,
I think so.
I mean, he could have just picked her up and
she's a dancer.
There.
Maybe that's what her fantasy was, that she wanted to dance for this guy. But yeah, I agree. I don't know if that really worked for me. And I wish that they make him very sinister right off the bat.
Yeah.
The Alan character. So you're not really surprised when he drugs her.
No.
I wish that maybe that they had made him more sympathetic at the beginning. So it was more of a twist.
Yeah, because he comes off a little better than the other.
But what does he say to her at the audition? Like, I want you to get down on your hands and knees and bark like a dog? Or
I think it was either bark or snort like a pig or
snort
something.
Like a pig, one or the other.
And she draws a line and says no. And
so the guy's a scumbag from the beginning.
Yeah, see, I didn't read it that way.
Huh.
Because his reaction to her was like, good for you. You've got some boundaries, right?
But he's still...
Yeah, fair. But I'm not saying this is a good thing, but I think he, rather than wanting to see her do that, he was testing her because he wanted to, I'm sure he sees dozens of young women who'll do anything.
For sure,
right?
for sure.
And he's like, okay, well, let's see how far you'll go. And I think if she had done it, she wouldn't have got the role because it's like, well, if you're going to stoop that low, I don't want...
Yeah, I guess because he had said that, I wasn't necessarily surprised when he drugged her.
No, not at all.
Whereas if he had seemed like he was really on her side the whole time and maybe didn't have questionable character flaws, I might have been...
Like being a Satanist?
Yeah, exactly. Then I might have been like, oh, he drugged her. That's cool. I did not see that coming. But I did see that coming, so it lost some of the suspense. Yeah, and then... I think as soon as you had mentioned that, and then she had the bruises, just almost every beat after that followed very much you know that she's pregnant, and you've got the doctor and the haircutting scene.
Yeah.
And you can't trust these people that she's living with. I will say, I was pleasantly surprised when it seemed like she was going to embrace the cult at the end.
Yeah, I thought that was a good twist.
And I thought, oh, this is cool. They're going to do something different that you think that because I had forgotten that she'd fallen out the window.
Okay.
So in my mind, I wasn't prepared for that. So I was really excited. Like, oh, this is really cool. Like they made it look like she was going to be this victim and that the cult was going to move against her. But in actuality, she's joining the cult and embracing the opportunity. Yeah. And I was excited about that. And then she threw herself out the window. I was like, oh, damn it. It was all an act.
Well, I wonder if they felt, well, first of all, if they're going to be true to the original, that's how Guy and Rosemary get the apartment, because they find out somebody's died.
Yes.
Right. So there's that. But there's also the idea, I think, that Rosemary, it's left ambiguous in the original. Ambiguous, but it's leaning towards she's accepting being the mother of the Antichrist.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that, like, it would not have made any sense for someone before Rosemary to accept her duty.
Yeah.
And then they would have had their Antichrist, so they wouldn't have needed Rosemary.
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
So I think just to be logical in terms of narrative structure, they had to do it the way they did it. But it was a nice twist too, because I feel like that scene gets you believing that she's okay. I'm not going to fight it anymore.
I was kind of excited by that. I thought maybe there'd be another circumstance where she might fall out the window.
Right.
Rather than.
But like by an accident, maybe. Or
sure. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I kind of like the idea. I thought it was refreshing that it seems like she's resisting, but then she just ends up embracing it in the end. I like the look of the, is it the first time maybe during that dance sequence where the devil is almost like, has like jewels all over? I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. And there's some speculation I read about that might be a nod to her wanting fame and fortune.
Right.
Because in Rosemary's Baby, it's her husband that's getting the benefit.
That's right.
Right? Because they're pulling strings for him to get acting jobs. And so Rosemary is the stay-at-home, partner.
Yeah.
And in this case, it is somebody who's doing it for themselves. So yeah, I mean, that was there were a lot of little scenes like that where she goes into the apartment. I mean, Rosemary finds the secret passage to go into the other apartment. And,
but then the look of the actual devil later, the more realistic looking one, I thought looked kind of cheesy. I didn't like the look of it. It almost took me out of it a little bit. Yeah,
I think an older film like Rosemary's Baby, he doesn't show, there's flashes. And
I prefer that.
Yeah, again,
leave it to the imagination.
I think he's doing it for two reasons. One, because a smart director knows your head's going to fill in stuff that's better. Mm-hmm. But he also had physical limitations at the time, technical limitations that maybe he couldn't get it on screen. But I think the problem now is people think, oh yeah, we'll fix it in post, we'll do CG, we'll do whatever.
Yeah.
Instead of being thoughtful about
the approach in the first place.
Like, do I need, just because I can show it, do I need to see it? Maybe, maybe not. Like maybe it's better to have almost a subliminal, just a flash, kind of like in The Exorcist with Pazuzu.
Which is so creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, now that was a happy accident, right? Because they weren't going, that was part of a whole other sequence that didn't make it in the film.
Yes.
But they left that. So, I think, again, when you try to take on something that's recognized as such a cornerstone of the genre, you open yourself up to comparisons, and in most cases I'm finding not positive ones.
No.
And that's not to take anything away from this director. I don't know how many features she's made. I mean, there's very few Roman Polanskis around, right?
Definitely.
So and that's a good thing if you consider
I was going to make that joke, yeah.
his criminal history.
Yeah.
But I don't, the only thing, my comment about Diane Wiest is great.
She's really good.
And I did like they played it differently than the Ruth Gordon character, who's kind of like this Ruth Gordon. She's this spacey kind of old lady.
Yeah.
And Diane Wiest has a definite razor edge to her.
But seems caring.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
But you're right. It's on an edge, and it doesn't take much to kind of cross it. And I feel like I've encountered people in real life who are like that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's like, oh, you're really nice. Unless I overstep this bound a little bit, then you're going to bite my head off.
Yeah.
And I thought she walked that line really well in like a genuine, authentic way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in terms of that couple, Roman, they were Roman and is it Minnie? No. What is
Minnie,
it?
I think. Yeah.
In both films, I like how they played sort of the grandfatherly, fatherly. He's got no edge to him. Although he is the leader of the cult.
That's right. He's a lot warmer and
he's got better people skills, and if he's agitated, he doesn't raise his voice. There's no edge.
no.
To what
And in
he's
their
doing.
relationship, it seems like she's got the control over him,
Absolutely.
which is kind of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're a lot like that, actually. You're really edgy if I cross a line.
Yeah, yeah. Because do you even know
Not that
where
I
the
ever
line
do
is?
that. Yeah, exactly. That's fair.
Okay, Diane. Go ahead. I'm just looking at my notes.
Yeah, for sure. So one thing I also rolled my eye at, and I know we've talked about this in other films, was the big exposition dump from the nun
yeah,
when she wanders into that church. That whole part maybe rolled my eyes. I feel like sometimes that is really bad and really obvious, and sometimes it's done well.
Yeah.
If they weave it in an authentic way. But just that started to turn me against the movie. I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. Here's the nun who gives all the background and all the stuff about the house, and it's kind of just done in one giant exposition dump. I thought it was pretty sloppy or lazy.
yeah. And I feel like I appreciate those when they go under 2 hours and they respect my time and they're going to give me exposition.
Yeah.
But if you're going to go 2 hours anyway, then make those a compelling 2 hours. And yeah, like that scene could have been cut completely.
Yeah.
Not sure about the abortion scene. I get what they were trying to go for, but you see that several times where the baby seems controlling her.
Yeah.
And so was it really necessary to show that again in another scene? I don't know.
And it's not their fault, but this is the third movie this year that's about someone being impregnated with the devil. Because we had Immaculate.
Yes.
And we had The First Omen and this one. And was Birth, Rebirth kind of a similar, it was a little different.
Yeah, it's more like a Frankenstein.
But this felt a bit like, okay, here we go again.
Yeah.
Like we're getting impregnated with the devil, which has come up a few times this year. So maybe part of it was that as well.
Yeah, and they
Something that would normally feel fresh or interesting. Maybe
Yes.
felt a bit, okay, like this is becoming a bit of a trope.
And they normally go in cycles, and it's always interesting like later to find out, oh, that film actually came out last, but it was 2 years in production before other ones. And sometimes it's just timing. Like, do you
Yeah, I'm not accusing them of copying anything.
No.
Yeah.
But no, I get what you're saying. And sometimes that is, you just go, oh, why are there why does this theme seem to be present?
Yeah.
And it could just be an event that happened a few years ago and everybody thought, hey, let's make a movie about
yeah,
this.
yeah.
Right?
It's interesting what spurs that on.
Yeah, totally.
But in like a 3-month period of seeing 3 films with that concept, which I feel like you rarely see, is weird. Yeah.
I mean, I came across the only one thing, this was a critical consensus, it seemed to be. Apartment 7A is slickly assembled and solidly acted. I'd give them that.
Agreed.
But the lingering memory of Rosemary's Baby and a predictable prequel template make this a subpar release.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%.
Yeah. I thought they nailed that one too.
And I'm not liking this trend of billing something as a prequel, but then just making it feel like the original.
Yeah.
That's kind of weird. Like with Stranger Chapter 1, like to the point of having the same dialogue
Yeah.
and the same beats. We see that again here. Like if you're going to make a prequel, that's fine. I think that makes more sense, but do something unique and different. Don't just remake the original and call it a prequel. I think that's a bit odd.
And there's no fault at tying in, dovetailing with the original, especially in this case, you couldn't help but do that. And that's fine. But make the majority of your story original and not reliant on things that were already done in the original.
Yeah.
Right?
But the thing I appreciate about that quote you read is I can't really point to anything in the film that's not well done.
Exactly.
Like it's a solid film. It's well shot. It's well acted. Like everything about it is good, but it's in the context of Rosemary's Baby and it being a prequel that creates all the issues.
And I mean, we've had mentioned this before too. So the opposite is true in this case, where the sum of its parts don't allow it to transcend what it is, right? Whereas sometimes you get these, serendipity moments where, on the whole, the movie is better than you think it should have been. And in this one, I'd say the opposite almost is true. It's not as good as you think it should be.
Yeah. And I feel like there's lots of interesting things they could have done with the concept, but I don't know if they felt like they had, like, I'm not sure why they decided to just do this exact same things as the first one though, with it.
Yeah. And that's, like I said earlier, I mean, I was trying not to spoil anything. I would have preferred to see a history of the building.
Yeah.
How it got that reputation, how those people took over. I'd rather see a different era of the building, maybe with the same subtext of a performer.
Yeah. I guess in the original, she's being gaslit by her husband.
Yes.
And you maybe don't have that, but she's kind of maybe being manipulated by the Alan character.
Yeah, and for sure, Minnie and Roman are gaslighting them, but the only difference is Rosemary has a partner who knows what's going on, whereas she doesn't. Right. Yeah. And in this case, her character doesn't know, but the one that's going to say Manicottis, that's not their name, whatever their last name is.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just think it was disappointing because I did have high hopes. But you've always got to keep that perspective in mind. It's like, okay, you're taking on a pretty big player here. So, and again, I want to be clear that I'm opinionated about whether I think a movie should, have a sequel, prequel, whatever. That doesn't mean people shouldn't try. So I give them credit for, and I said earlier, like, I think it was a brave step to even take this on.
And I remember we talked in season 2 as well, that a film made in 1968 is completely valid in 2024 to remake that film.
Yeah.
I think we were dubious about remakes that were happening within like 10 years of the original. But this is actually one of those bigger gaps you're going to get. Yeah. So I'm okay with them doing a remake. And I maybe would have preferred.
I was going to say, then call it a remake.
Should they just have made it a remake?
Yeah.
Because it certainly felt like a remake.
Indeed.
But it's not. Well, I think that's all I got to say about this one. I don't have too much to add.
So I'm going to go out on a limb and say I don't think this will make your top 10 of 2024.
We'll have to see.
And we'll see you in the aisles.